Saanich, and thank you for joining me for this week's First Chapter Friday. Today I will be reading My Dear Hamilton by Stephanie Dray and Laura Kamoie. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. You have called together a host of savages and turned them loose to scalp our women and children and lay our country waste. Anonymous American soldier to British General John Burgoyne. October 17, 1777. The Pastures, Albany, New York. I was someone before I met Alexander Hamilton. Not someone famous or important or with a learned philosophical understanding of all that was at stake in our revolution. Not a warrior or a philosopher or statesman. But I was a patriot. I was no unformed skein of wool for Hamilton to weave together into any tapestry he wished. That's impertinent for me to remember now, when every thread of my life has become tangled with everything he was. Impertinent, I think, inserting out what can be forgiven, to remember my own experiences, the ones filled with my own yearnings that had nothing to do with him. I was, long before he came into my life, a young woman struggling to understand her place in a changing world. In turn, even then, between loyalty, duty, and honor in the face of betrayal. Turn, as I stood in my family's potato field, surrounded by wounded soldiers, debating a choice that would never have given me pause before. Should I tend to the injured redcoats while under the gaze of mistrustful American soldiers? Water, please, Miss Schuyler, croaked a British regular, lying in a furrow beneath one of our orchard trees. He'd been evacuated here to Albany with at least 1,000 others from Saratoga, where a brutal battle had been fought 10 days earlier. Our hospital, churches, and pastures were now overrun with casualties from both armies, and we struggled to care for them all. The least I could do was fetch the redcoat a pitcher of water. Instead, I hesitated, a knot of anxiety tightening in my throat, for I was now the daughter of a disgraced American general who had been relieved of his command under suspicion of treason. Facing court-martial, my father already stood accused of taking bribes from the British and surrendering an American fortress to the enemy. For his daughter to be seen caring for the same enemy now? I feared for anything I might do to worsen Papa's situation. So even as my face heated with shame, I turned away from the redcoat to help others, forcing myself to remember that these British had been ravaging the whole of the Hudson Valley for months and terrorizing my countrymen. They are the cause of this bloodshed, I told myself. For the king's men had captured and occupied New York City, burned our state's first capital at Kingston to the ground, and during the fighting upon the plains of Saratoga, they had set fire to our summer house, leaving it in ruin. From here in the relative safety of the pastures, we'd seen only the faintest glow of battlefield fires against the distant evening sky. But even now, the acrid smell and taste of soot carried to us downriver, and I thought, we've set the whole world on fire. 2 summers before, our 13 colonies declared independence from the British Crown. But now our celebratory bonfires had given way to the flames of war. I hoped, following this American victory at Saratoga, that we were finally winning it. So I tended to a Continental scout who held a gory wound on his scalp that had reopened since a doctor last saw him. "How bad is it, Miss Schuyler?" he asked, grimacing against the pain as I washed the wound and pulled my needle through the gash at his hairline. Fortunately, your brow is cool, and it does not look to have festered, I replied. Fresh red blood oozed warmly over my fingertips. Try not to pull it open again, I told the young soldier as I finished my stitches and cut the thread with a hunting knife. While my father taught me to ride, fish, and know my way in the wild, my mother had trained me in rudimentary medicine while tending tenants, Indians, and one frontier army or another. And since I couldn't fight in this war, I contributed the way women could. I sewed. Uniforms, socks, flesh. If all goes well, you'll be left with a battle scar to prove your bravery. He grinned. Thank you. As a general's daughter, I knew that soldiers liked to hear that. But it seemed, these days, I never knew what to say to please my mother. Betsy, she snapped from where she stood at the back gate, removing an apron she dirtied, helping soldiers in the nearby pastures. Go in the house with the other children and clean up. Your father is expected shortly from the surrender at Saratoga. We must prepare to receive his guests. I winced, fearful the scout beside me would misconstrue her words. For we were not expecting guests, but British prisoners. Nor was I one of the children. In fact, I just turned 20. But I knew better than to point any of this out to my mother, a stern Dutch plantation mistress who'd been exceedingly vexed with me for months now. You're the sensible one, Elizabeth, she'd said in the heat of our quarrel. I expected better. As if I could stop the tides of change any more than she could. I didn't say that, either. I merely wiped my hands, bobbed my head, picked up my skirts, and went. Broken oyster shells crunched underfoot on the drive as I passed the stables and made my way to my father's handsome brick mansion, which stood upon a bluff overlooking the majestic Hudson River. The house was a flurry of activity as I hurried past kerchiefed Negro slaves moving the heavy mahogany table into the grand entry hall and up the stairs to the bedroom I shared with my sisters. Well, just one now. Now, since Angelica had run off to marry a mysterious suitor against Papa's wishes a few months before. Now it was just me and 18-year-old Peggy, who shared the spacious pale green room with its wardrobes, armchairs, and canopied bed. Why can't General Gates take these prisoners? Peggy cried, yanking on a pair of stockings. He took Papa's victory, after all. That's true, I said. It was bad enough that a rival had pushed our father out of command. Worse that we were now saddled with the captives. We'd shown courtesy to imprisoned British officers before, in the early years of the war, most notably to the dashing Lieutenant John Andre, a clever and genteel officer who charmed my sisters and me with his sketches and accomplished flute playing. But my father wasn't under suspicion then, and General Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne was no Andre. He was a monster and no gentleman at all. How was it going to look to the Continental soldiers in our fields, not to mention our tenants and neighbors, if we wined and dined the very same British general who sent Mohawk Indians to terrorize them? But as our black lady's maid, Jenny, swept into the room and unfastened my apron and frock while fretting about the bloodstains, I reminded Peggy, even if you're right about Papa's victory being stolen out from under him, you cannot say such things, lest you rub the salt of injustice into his still raw wounds. And you especially cannot say it in front of the British, lest they sense disunity amongst our generals. That's no secret, is it? Peggy asked. Thankfully not, because Peggy was never very good with secrets. Indeed, Peggy had the habit of speaking aloud what others left unspoken. In fact, she'd quite nearly given away Angelica's plan to escape the house and run off with her beau. Though now I sometimes wish she had. I wished we both had. I just hate that we must go to all this trouble for the same lobsterbacks who burned our Saratoga house, Peggy grumbled, rummaging in her tall oak wardrobe amidst taffeta, frilly petticoats, gauzy fichus, and embroidered stomateurs. On a sigh, I stepped into the petticoats Jenny held for me. I hate it too. I hated that I couldn't be as happy about our American victory as I should have been. Hated that our Saratoga house was in ashes. Hated that Papa faced court-martial, his reputation in tatters. Hated that Angelica was gone and our mother blamed me for it. And hated most of all that it might be, at least in some small part, my fault. Peggy harumphed, admiring her dark glossy curls in a looking-glass. Well, we'll at least remind these king's men that we're not paupers. We're the blue robe a la Francais. Oh, and the blue earbobs. I know what you're going to say, but they're not too showy. They were, for me. Angelica was the sophisticated one, Peggy the pretty one, and I was Philip Schuyler's practical daughter, the one who, as the second child in a family as large and prominent as Philip Schuyler's, was sometimes apt to be overlooked. There was even a story told in my family that when I was a babe, Mama was so distracted by her many responsibilities that she accidentally left me bound up in my cradle board, hanging from a tree in the way of the natives. So it was from the smallest age one can conceive of such a thing. I considered it quite natural to be overlooked. And I never minded, because it allowed me to slip away, to swim in the river, or stay up past bedtime without anyone noticing. And tag along after my father on adventures that were forbidden to other girls. Besides, people said very interesting things in front of girls they didn't notice. And that is the beginning of Chapter 1 of My Dear Hamilton. To see what happens next, check out this title on Hoopla. Thank you, and have a great day.